everybody, and welcome to the Commander Pod, your Magic the Gathering podcast for all things Commander. I'm Spencer Simpson.
And I'm Kelton Howell. And this week, we're going to continue our series on lands, and this time we're going to cover monocolor and utility lands.
Yes, in our final episode, we're going to be doing Build a Mana Base. So we're going to put together all of the episodes that we have done so far, the dual lands, the tricolor and multicolor lands, and now the monocolor and utility lands. So that's going to be the last episode, is putting that all together. And today, we're not going to be doing a traditional tier list as we've done so far. We're going to be separating it into categories based on not playability necessarily, but how many decks will be playing these cards in the realm of Commander.
When it comes to utility lands, some of those utilities are extremely narrow to a specific strategy or something that the deck is trying to do. We're also going to be ignoring power level for the most part because that's an entirely different discussion, but you will see some pretty powerful cards on here like Ancient Tomb or Gaia's Cradle, and that's up to you to figure out what kind of power level your deck wants to be and make sure it fits into your playgroup. So we're only talking about utility here.
Yeah, so when we talk about this belongs in every deck, we don't actually think it belongs in every deck at every power level, but a deck could play this happily in the colors that it's played in, if that makes sense. Outside of the power level discussion. So should we jump in? Should we just jump right into to talking about these lands?
Yeah, let's do it. I can't wait.
Okay, let me open up here, get the right thing going, and boom, we are over in Moxfield with our list of lands. Do we want to just do alphabetically this time? We've kind of had different orders.
Let's do it.
Okay, starting with Academy Ruins. Academy Ruins is a legendary land that taps for a colorless. And you can pay 1 and a blue to tap it to put target artifact card in your graveyard on top of your library.
I think I underestimate the utility of a land being a legendary land. I think it triggers a lot more than I think it does, and it fits a lot of things that care about historic permanence.
Oh, interesting. I haven't thought about that aspect of this.
And I think it's probably pretty good. Still, I think this is probably goes in. I think we're going to talk about like categories like most decks, some decks, and fewer decks. I don't know what categories we want to do, but I think this is on the lower end because you have to really just care about artifacts and have a lot of artifacts in your deck that are going to your graveyard probably.
Yeah, I think this is super specific. I mean, a lot of decks will play artifacts, and like you'll play Soul Ring and your Soul Ring get destroyed. I don't think it's worth playing this just to be able to get your Soul Ring back. I think
3 mana, it blanks your next draw. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, this is something where, like, on turn 5, you've cast your, like, Elhamret's Archive, your big artifact that's going to be splashy and impactful, and then it gets countered or gets destroyed or whatever. It gets destroyed 2 turns later or something. And then I think the thing that's really cool about this is on the turn that you're going to have the mana to cast it again, in your upkeep, you activate Academy Ruins, put that card back on top of your library, draw
after
it for
you've
your
untapped.
Draw step. Yeah, after you've untapped. Yeah, which I think is kind of sick.
That seems cool.
But
cool
only, I think decks that want this will want it. Artifact decks that play lots of big artifacts, lots of impactful artifacts, or artifacts that you want back, I think will want this. Only blue decks can play it, but I think it's a cool one. We'll put it in not very many lands. Tier 3. How do we want to name this?
Yeah. Should we do like most, some, and few? Like most
few.
decks, some decks, and few decks?
I love that. Few decks will want Academy Ruins, but it is a good card. It's a good card to be playing in the decks that will want it. The next one here is Alchemist Refuge, and I think one that we maybe should have talked about that we do want to talk about as a part of this that goes in any deck really, or not goes in any deck, but can go in any deck is
Emergence Zone.
Emergence Zone. Thank you.
Yeah. So the Alchemist Refuge taps for a colorless, and then you pay green, blue, and tap it, and you may cast spells this turn as though they had flash. Emergence Zone taps for a colorless, and you can pay 1, tap, and sacrifice it, and then you can cast spells this turn as though they had flash. So this one is repeatable, which is pretty good. This one is obviously restricted to Simic decks, whereas Emergence Zone is colorless, and it can go in any deck. But functionally, this one's better in the sense that it's repeatable. It does cost 1 more mana to activate, but you're not down a land. You don't have to sacrifice the land.
Yeah, the reason I put this in here was because I've been playing a lot of CDH recently, and especially in green colors that can crop rotation for something like Emergence Zone, it's really good to be able to do that and try to win at instant speed on top of other people's like win attempts and whatever. And I saw Alchemist Refuge, which I didn't even know was a card, and I thought, this is sick because if you activate Alchemist Refuge, you get stopped on your win attempt. Then you can just Alchemist Refuge again on a later turn, which is kind of sick because then you're not out of the mana, and it only is one more mana, which does matter, right? Like that one additional mana matters, and the color restriction also matters. But I'm playing a Tasigur deck, and so I do have...
You've got loads of mana and loads of
well, at the very least, I can play Alchemist Refuge because I'm playing Simic, right? Which I think is sick. And so I put this in this list instead of Emergent Zone because it made my brain start to wonder if this is better. But I think regardless, I think there are not very many decks that want to play Emergent Zone or Alchemist Refuge, right?
Yeah, it makes me feel like it's mostly a combo thing. I will say the thing I like about how this is worded is you may cast spells, which I think then works with your commander from the command zone. Whereas like some things make it so you can cast spells from your hand as though they had flash.
Interesting.
I believe the templating is different across some of these effects. So I like these ones. It also, my brain, I have some decks that care about exile, and I like the idea that I could cast cards from exile as though they had flash. This is obviously the wrong colors for that. It would be Emergent Zone is much better for that. But it provides a lot of flexibility. So it's still a land that enters untapped and taps for mana, so there's not a huge downside to running this, and there's going to be the occasional upside when you can flash in a big threat. It's just a way to use your mana at instant speed, and that's always going to be valuable in a deck.
For sure. I don't think, if we're talking about Emergent Zone specifically, that any deck can run, I don't think there are many decks that want Emergent Zone, because it's a one-time...
Because you're sacrificing the land.
Because you're sacrificing the land. Yeah, I think...
This one, though, probably goes in... some decks.
Some Simic decks I think will want this. I think the real power... I like being able to do stuff at instant speed. I just built a casual Tasigur deck that is built entirely around doing stuff at instant speed. But I don't think that outside of high power or like combo or like CDH, doing stuff at instant speed is really that impactful if it's costing you this much mana. Like,
yeah, would you... If your spells cost 3 more mana to cast at instant speed, would you be tempted? Would you still want to cast them at instant speed?
No way. No, because I think like if you're thinking of like there's a spell called Rout, for example, right? Rout is, I think it's called Rout. Should we look it up? I think Rout is you can cast at instant speed. Rout. Is it not called Rout? R-O-U-T? Yeah, Rout. Yeah, three white for a sorcery. You can cast it if it had, as though it had flash for 2 more mana to draw creatures.
Sure. I mean, 5 to 7 is a really big jump, though.
Sure, but like but 4 to 7 is a big jump, and then 1 to 4 is a big jump.
Would you rather just play High Fate Trickster though, because that's like permanently giving you that for 4 mana, whereas like this costs 3 mana to activate once?
Yeah, I do. I think so. Oops, sorry, we jumped too far back here. Did we lose it? Oh, I need to.
I think you're in a different list.
No, I'm in the same list.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Alchemist Refuge. I think.
Is it few?
I think it's few. I don't think very many decks want to play this. I think it's a cool effect. I don't think it's that phenomenal, if I'm being honest.
The next one though is Ancient Tomb. It taps to add 2 colors, mana 2 mana pool. It deals 2 damage to you, and this goes in most. It can go in most decks. Once again, this is like a power level thing, but regardless of power level, most decks want it.
Let me. I'm gonna change the tags here. We're gonna do this on the fly. I'm gonna make this 3.
Nice. Okay. So there's some ordering to this.
Yeah. And then we'll change this one to. Whoops. Most.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Okay. You want to do the next one?
Yeah, Arena of Glory. This card is sick. Arena of Glory enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. It taps to add a red. Or you can pay a red and tap and exert Arena of Glory, meaning it doesn't untap during your next untap step, to add 2 red mana. If that mana is spent to cast a creature spell, it gains haste until end of turn. And you pointed out, as we were talking about this, that you can spread that mana across 2 creatures to give 2 separate creatures haste. So for 1 mana next turn, right? Because this turn you're going even on mana. You're giving creatures haste this turn, which is nuts. This card is crazy.
It's really good. I almost feel like this needed to have like you can only spend this to pay for red mana, like red colored mana.
Oh, sure.
I mean, this is just if this is paid into a generic spell on a gruel creature or just like a green creature or something, like it still gets haste. That's crazy, you know?
Yeah.
It's really
it had to have
powerful.
like a Jegantha the Wellspring type restriction. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this goes in most red decks. I don't know why you wouldn't play this in a red deck.
Most decks that can play this want it, I think. I think Arena of Glory is insane. And if outside of like a Spellslinger deck, I guess, right? Like it
has to be a creature deck.
Right. Creature-based strategies will want it. But that's like, there's a lot of, I wouldn't say most red decks, but very many red decks will want this.
Sure.
And so what was the middle one? Some, yeah, okay, great.
But I mean, it's just it just taps for red. Like you just replace a mountain probably, and it's still fine.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah,
it replaces. I think that's a good benchmark. Is that it replaces because it enters untapped too if you have a mountain. So if it replaces a basic neutrally plus some benefit, like I think that's really good.
Yep.
Speaking of which, Bojuka Bog, and I don't know if this is actually speaking of which, but we'll read Bojuka Bog. It enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, exile target player's graveyard. It taps to add a black. I don't play Bojuka Bog. Should I?
Okay, I think I should. I don't play it very often, but there are a lot of games where I think, boy, I wish I had a Bojuka Bog right now.
Right.
Because it's free.
I think people should play more Graveyard Hate. I think Bojuka Bog is an option for Graveyard Hate. I don't like that it enters tapped. I don't like drawing it early. But every time
here's what's so much better about this though, because you could play like Soul Guide Lantern, right? Is like one of the best Graveyard Hate cards, right?
Right.
And it costs you 1, and does it replace itself? You can sacrifice.
I think you can either replace itself or
exile a graveyard.
Yeah.
Okay, so think about just exiling a graveyard. You pay 1 mana to play. It costs you a card and 1 mana, and you get to exile someone's graveyard. This kind of doesn't cost you a card. It just costs you the 1 mana because it enters tapped. But then the next turn, it's just your land drop. Like it's untapped the next turn.
Sure.
So it's really kind of like a free. It costs 1 mana, but it doesn't really cost you the card because it's also your land drop.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I think you got me on Bojuka Bog. I think more people should be playing this. What I will say about Bojuka Bog is every time I've been Bojuka Bogged, because I play a lot of graveyard strategies, it's felt not good. Because I typically
graveyard strategies are so busted. Like
they're so strong.
You have to. I think there has to be Graveyard Hate in more decks.
For sure. I think if I'm pushing for more people should be playing recursion or ways to access their graveyard in their decks.
Which you should.
Which I think you should. I think you should also push for play Bojuka Bog in a black deck because I don't play this in a 5-color deck. In a 5-color deck, play a creature that interacts with graveyards or something. Like play something within your strategy that does it.
Yeah, but like 1 or 2 color black. Yeah, for sure.
Run Bojuka Bog
playing this. I just think there's been so many good recursion pieces printed. Like pre-war formalware that just like grabs creatures out of your graveyard, puts them on the battlefield and buffs them, and it's like you can blink it and reuse it. Or I think there's like the 4 mana one for Modern Horizons 3. Was it from Modern Horizons 3 that just like gets all of the small creatures out of your graveyard, reanimates all of them? Like there's just so many good recursion pieces being printed that like, your graveyard really should be an extension of your hand at this point in Commander, and so we just need the Graveyard Hate.
Yeah, it's. I think graveyards are not looked at enough by people when they're playing. They're not. People aren't aware of graveyards until they have something that does something with the graveyard. Yeah. And it's important to think about. And Bojuka Bog will stop someone that's trying to do that stuff. I think most decks will want Bojuka Bog, and I think most decks will want this card as well. Will you read this one for us, Kelt?
Yeah, Boseiju, Who Endures, is another legendary land. It taps for green. It has channel. 1 in a green, discard Boseiju, Who Endures. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search their library for a land card with a basic land type, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. This ability costs 1 less to cast, or to activate. Sorry, not cast, and that's actually very important. To activate for each legendary creature you control. And I say that's important because channel is an ability. And so it does go on the stack, but it's not a cast, so it can't be countered except by something like Stifle that stifles a activated ability.
Yeah, Stifle counters an activated ability or triggered ability. It has kind of become a stifle effects have become a synonymous for things that will do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay, side note about stifle. I learned this the other day. Did you know that storm is a triggered ability?
Whoa, really?
So you can stifle storm triggers.
You can stifle the storm trigger so you don't get any of the copies?
Yeah, so I was playing a
That's
CDH
cool.
game. Someone cast a Flusterstorm to protect. Someone had cast a Flusterstorm.
Whoa.
Someone cast their own Flusterstorm to protect their stuff. And someone had a stifle in hand. And they stifled the storm trigger on the Flusterstorm.
That's crazy. I
Which is
didn't know
kind
you
of
could do
sick.
that.
Yeah, it was really cool. Yeah, Channel's insane. Channel can't be countered except by stifle effects. I think the other thing about this is that it costs generally 1 mana. And 1 mana to destroy a non-creature, non-planeswalker permanent, basically, is...
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
Assassin's
really
Trophy
good.
is played in most Golgari decks. It's such a good card. This is like baby Assassin's Trophy on a land is insane.
Yeah, I never want to play this as a land. It's
No.
such good removal.
No, I mean, early if I need it. But that's the thing, though, as early as a land drop, you can. And then...
Yeah, but it is also just a land, yeah.
Yeah, which is sick.
Yeah.
And then
This
you're playing,
goes in every green deck, right?
Oh, for sure. Every deck will want this. It's removal on a land. It's so good. We're gonna put it up with most here. Okay,
All right, on to Cabal Coffers.
Cabal Coffers. Cabal Coffers is a land you can pay 2 and tap it to add 1 black mana for each swamp you control. Basically you have to spend 3 mana. When this becomes net positive is when you have 4 swamps, right?
Yep.
If you have something like Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, that makes Urborg a swamp and this a swamp, and then you just need 2 other swamps and you're netting positive. This gets out of control as you get more and more swamps.
Yeah.
But not every black
How many
deck wants
decks do you
this.
play this in? I want to know, because I know you like this card.
I used to play Cabal Coffers Urborg in like a lot of my 2-color black decks because I had purchased both of them and I thought they were so sick. I put this in mono black decks now.
Yep. That's kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah,
So
so
I think it's so powerful. I think it goes in few. I think
Few,
it's in three.
yeah. So, but most mono black decks, I guess, will want this, right?
Sure.
So
So some. So is it a 2?
So okay, no. So time out. I think if we're talking, we're talking about decks that can play this. Most decks will want it, right?
Yeah, but most decks can't play Cabal Coffers.
Right. So I think.
That can play it.
So I think few decks want this. Most mono black decks want this, but few decks playing black will want this, right? So
Maybe that's a sum. I don't know. Either way,
Yeah.
You've heard our conversation about it. You know when to play this. If you're a
Yep.
mono black, play it.
Yep. Why is it untagged?
Whoa,
Oh well.
that's crazy.
We're going to see if it continues to untag stuff. I might have to do a little refresh here. Castle Ardenvale is the next one. It is a land, because we're talking about lands. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control planes, which is sick, which means it can enter untapped. You can tap it down to white, or you can pay 2 white, and tap it to create a 1/1 white human creature token.
I think the downside of this entering tapped far outweighs, like potentially entering tapped. I think far outweighs the utility that you get for the 5 mana
Yeah, I guess
to create a human.
Yeah, 5 mana to create a human is not good. 5 mana to create 2 humans if you have a token doubler is like, or a token tripler, it's like pretty decent.
Sure, I still don't want to
guess.
do that.
No,
I don't know.
you don't want to do that. Here's the thing: is like these type of cards, I always rate so much higher than they are in Commander, because in Limited, like 4 mana to create a human when you're like in the last stage, like the late stages of a Limited game,
Sure,
feels
I
so
guess.
good. You know what I mean? Like this is still bad, but like you play stuff like Spectral Sailor, which is 4 mana draw a card on a creature.
I guess you can play this in mono white, but you're still not excited about it. Like, how often do you
No.
ever activate it even? Like, is it worth it just to have another basic plane so you can get it off of land tax?
I mean, potentially, but you're already playing so many basic plays. Like, just play this in a mono white deck, but no other deck wants this.
Sure, but then, I mean, like, in a mono white deck, I'd rather be playing, like, Fountain Port, which we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Create a fish. What if you care about humans?
Or draw a card or create a treasure token. Like,
Sure. Okay.
And-
yeah. Few decks want this. I don't think Castle Ardenvale is that good. I think it's bad. I think it's the worst of the castles that we're going to talk about, probably.
Now let's
not
talk
the
about
worst.
the next worst one, or the worst one, probably. I don't know. Castle Embereth enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain. It taps for red, or you can pay 1 red, tap it. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end turn. This one can at least be a finisher in a go wide deck. This is better than Castle Ardenvale, right?
For sure, that's pretty good. 4 mana, a 4 mana Alpha Strike is like not unheard of to give your creatures like +1/+1, right?
I think that's kind of. I mean, I don't know. 4 mana to just give +1/+1, I probably wouldn't do.
But it's creatures,
Maybe.
all your creatures. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's
You have to have how many creatures do you have to? How many creatures do you have to have before you feel good about this? Like a total of +5 toughness. If you have 5 creatures, will you pay 4 mana to get another 5 damage on the board?
Nope, no. But like, hopefully you have like, say you have 10 creatures, right?
Yeah.
Which like in a go by deck
Then
is
it's
also
good.
not unheard of. Yeah,
That's an
like
extra 10 damage.
10 damage. That's pretty solid. In like a goblin deck, I think some decks want Castle Embereth. I think this will be our first sum. How does that sound?
Because
Okay,
it goes
first
in
of all,
more than just mono red. Do you think it goes in more than mono red?
We're gonna get rid of that. There we go. I put this in like a Gruul deck probably. I don't know, maybe not. Like I'm thinking of, I have a Faldorn Gruul deck. Is this in my Faldorn Gruul deck?
Yeah, you make a lot of wolves. You have a
Yeah.
lot of creatures.
A lot of creatures, and to just like pump them up by 1, it's kind of sick. And like if they're 2/2s and they become a 3/2, that's like pretty relevant. But like if they're 3/3s and they become 4/3s, for some reason that feels to me like 4 is, but 4 is also
Sure.
like a really relevant
Yeah,
power,
it is.
right?
Yes. Okay. I mean, sure. I could go with Sam on this one. It's better than Castle Ardenvale. I just
It
don't know
also
how
doesn't
much better
cost
it is.
you a card, and it's just better than a basic mountain. Like
Yeah.
here's the thing.
It
about
requires two red to activate out of the 3
Sure.
mana that it takes to activate.
Sure, but here's the thing about Castle Embereth and even Castle Ardenvale. Like in monocolors, it's virtually never going to enter tapped, because if you don't have another plains or another mountain, then like why are you keeping that hand in the first place? And then like on top of that, it does something, right? It does something that a basic land doesn't do, which is this activated ability. So unless you specifically care about like the number of mountains you control, or like you're doing like a mind collapse, like sacrifice a mountain to destroy an artifact, or like I guess like what's Mog Salvage, the other one, if you control a mountain.
Sure.
but you
I do
can
think
control
plains are
mountain
more valuable than mountains are.
anyways. Because of land tech specifically.
Yeah, and all the other white catch-up ramp. Like, white catch-up ramp, I think, is actually pretty good.
Look for plains
And it-
specifically. Sure,
Most
but
of it cares about plains.
Right, but you're not going to run out of plains in your mono white.
I've run out of plains with land tax.
Have you really?
Yeah.
Sure, but that's like a whole that's like a whole different problem. Like you're not. If you run out of plains with land tax, it's not because you included Castle Ardenvale.
Yeah.
I think Castle Embereth is some decks probably.
Okay,
I think
yeah.
it's our first sum.
I'll buy it.
All right, cool. Oops. Some. There we go. It's
Guys,
our
let's
first
do the
sum
green
on the list.
castle.
Castle Garen Brigg. Enters battlefield tapped unless you control a forest. Taps for a green. Why could I not think of the color? Taps for a green mana. Taps for a tree. And then you can pay 2 and 2 trees to tap it to add 6 green mana. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells or activate abilities of creatures.
So this is a temple of the false god that can also just tap for mana.
Yeah, right? It just like, yeah, until you have 5. That's true. That's a really good comparison. Until you have 4 other lands or mana sources.
The issue is you only want to want green off of this, because if you only have 4 other lands, you've now restricted yourself to only green mana.
Okay, yeah, so
If you have 5 other lands, you get 1 pip of another color.
yeah, so let's talk about the castles in general, I guess, about this. I think the castles in general we're playing in monocolor decks.
For
Mostly.
the most part.
Right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about this in the same context as we were talking about Cabal Coffers, do few decks want this?
Probably, especially because you can only cast creature spells off it, which most green decks, I would say, are going to be pretty happy casting creatures.
Okay, so should we add a different category that's like monocolor decks want this?
I mean, that's what few is supposed to be, right? Like it's a narrow use case. I don't know. Like monocolor is kind of a narrow use case. It's less narrow than artifacts probably, but
Yeah, I guess if we start doing that, then it's like with Academy Ruins, or we're like, okay, just artifact decks.
artifacts. We'll just
Yeah,
tag
so should we change-
whatever you're supposed to play it in.
Yeah, okay, few means narrow, everybody. Few.
Just change it to narrow. Oh, I guess that's hard to do.
I'd have to change all 4. I could do that really quick. Watch how good I am at this. Narrow.
Actually, if any of you know, we love Moxfield. Moxfield is actually absolutely our favorite tool in the world. This is like one of the hard things I've run into with Moxfield. So if you know anyone over at Moxfield, let us know. We'd love to submit a feature request.
So most, some, narrow. And then few is just like, should we also do like, is narrow an additional category? Should we just call it X narrow?
Sure.
Okay, I like it.
There's got to be a way to change all the tags at once. I've tried to find it, but I can't figure it out.
Narrow. Okay, here's what we're doing. We're calling it narrow.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, because I have to also change the frickin'... Nope, whoops. Remove tag. It jumped on me, all right? Remove tag. Narrow. No, it's not narrow anymore. Okay, what do we call it? All right, everybody, bear with us here. Narrow.
This is great content.
Narrow. Few. This is few.
That one's few.
This one's few. All right. We got to figure it out. This is what everyone comes to see. Good good video podcast content. Maybe not good audio podcast content.
Oh, really good audio podcast.
Okay, for those who are listening, we just went through 5 minutes of trying to figure out Moxfield. You heard that, but what you didn't see was me moving cards around. That's what the visual part was. Okay. So we now have 4 categories. Our one category is narrow, where cards are played in a lot of decks within this narrow specific strategy.
I don't think Castle Ardenvale belongs in there. I think it goes in few.
Yeah, Castle Ardenvale's few. You're right. Okay, Castle Ardenvale sucks, goes in few. Castle Embrith is narrow. No, it's some.
Sure, it's some. That's
Great.
fine. I mean, it's still narrow in the sense that, like, you have to be a creature deck. You have to care about creatures.
Sure, fine. It's narrow also. All the castles are narrow. We're skipping the other ones. Just kidding. Castle Locthwain is our next one. Enters tapped unless you control swamp. Taps for black. Pay 1. Black. Draw a card, then lose life equal to the number of cards in your hand. 4 mana, draw a card. When you have nothing else to do,
lose 6 life.
Lose 6 life. This feels kind of good when you have not very many cards in your hand. Like, I might put this.
Feels really good if you have 0 cards in hand. You pay 4 mana, draw 1 card, lose a life. I mean, it gets you a card.
Yeah,
you weren't casting anything anyways.
Yeah, I have a Striffon deck that plays pretty hellbent.
Yeah.
I might put this in there.
Sure.
I don't know.
Because it's a swamp.
Even then, though, File of Galadriel just, like, feels better than this.
Oh, way better.
Right?
I won't lie. I do not really play any of the castles.
Okay.
The one that I have played is the Garenbrig one, and I took it out.
Okay.
Because it just produced too much just straight up green. I don't think it's narrow. I think it's just few.
So, Castle Locthwain's few. Castle of Ventress also few.
Yeah, so this is the same thing, but you pay 4, tap it, and you scry 2.
Yeah, so 5 mana to scry 2, essentially, which we don't like. Few decks.
Yeah.
Bad. Okay, here's a card that you play that I do not play, that I should play.
I think you should. It's Command Beacon. It's a land. It taps for colorless, or you can tap and sacrifice it to put a commander into your hand from the command zone. So I think this plays really well because it does kind of give you a 1 mana tax in the sense that you're using this and then you're also losing it. So it's kind of a 1 mana compounding tax. So as long as your commander tax is like 4 or 6, then this is very much worth spending to get your commander back into your hand after you've already cast it a few times from the command zone.
For sure, and we talked briefly about when this would be good amongst ourselves, me and Kelson. And we thought, okay, well, 6 mana commanders or high mana value commanders. This is pretty good because then it like lets you cast them for their mana value essentially when you.
Yeah. You might even crack this earlier if you have a higher mana commander, because once you get to 8 or 10, you're like, well, I don't know that I can cast this anymore, and this reduces it back down to 6.
Right, and then you just cast it for 6 mana. Whereas like with a low mana value commander, like 2 mana, 1 mana, you just wait until it costs like 7, 8 mana. And then you're like, okay, sick. Now it's just a 2 mana.
Now it costs 2.
Now it costs 2. And then on top of that, if there's decks that like can recur lands, or you can play lands from your graveyard, like that's kind of sick.
That's really sweet,
right? Like honestly, this is a sick card that I didn't have at the time when I had a Muldrotha deck that goes in Muldrotha for sure. Because it's just like a land drop that lets you cast Muldrotha for its mana cost, right?
Totally.
Or like, I guess like
anything
land
that's running. Ramming up excavator or
Gitrog
Conduit
monster.
of
Like this is freaking sick in the Gitrog monster. I guess you're not ever doing this when the Gitrog monster's on the battlefield.
Sure.
But
you could sacrifice this and then with it on the stack
sacrifice the
Gitrog monster.
Yeah. Point being, this goes in most decks for sure.
I think so.
It's very good. I don't play it enough. But it's very good. I'm narrow, whatever. That's fine.
It's fine.
Okay. Darksteel Citadel. This is a narrow card, and we'll tell you why I should read it first. It is an artifact land. There's an entire cycle of these. We're only talking about Darksteel Citadel. This one specifically has Indestructible, which the other ones don't, which I learned from sad experience. And it taps for 1 colorless mana. The other ones tap for mana of their given color. We're talking about Seed of the Synod. We're talking about whatever the other ones are. I can't remember the rest of them.
Story time. Spencer was playing an artifacts deck, and all of his lands were artifact lands. Most of them, at least.
Yep.
And
I had just acquired Pact of Negation, which I was so excited to play.
Yes.
And so I wasn't even going for a win. I just was trying to protect my commander, and I was like, I've got
Is
the
that
mana.
what it was?
Yes, I had out. So it was Silas
Akiri
Ren,
and
Akiri.
Silas.
Yeah, Akiri Silas, 4 color. And Akiri gets bigger with the artifacts you control, so you want to play artifact lands. And she got Swords to Plowshares, and I was like, I'll just Pact of Negation this, because I was still kind of new and didn't really know that was a bad thing to be doing, and that Pact of Negation is not really like that great of a card outside of like trying to comp like key turns. And I could have just cast her again. But so I did Pact of Negation, and then what happened, Kelton?
Yeah, I played Vandal Blast on my turn to destroy all of his artifact lands, and then he couldn't pay for Pact of Negation on upkeep and lost, and it was awesome.
Lost on like turn 4 and watched everyone else play a game of Commander. I would call Darksteel Citadel narrow.
It's narrow. It's great in artifact decks.
For sure.
There's no reason to play it in anything else.
Right, exactly. I mean, I guess in like an Eldrazi deck, like, sure.
Sure, if you need colorless mana.
Yeah.
It taps for colorless.
That's
but
sick.
There's a lot of other better cards that tap for
Has this been errata to tap for waste? Tap for colorless? I guess one is colorless specifically. All colorless mana is wastes. They just have printed it as different things at different times.
Well, waste produces colorless mana. There's a difference between colorless and generic mana.
This produces colorless mana, not
colorless
generic.
mana.
Gotcha. Because the one
I think it
typically
has been
indicates
errata.
generic mana.
Yes.
But this creates colorless mana, which is the wastes symbol, the little diamond.
It's been errata. It does the little symbol.
Because I know Soul Ring, because if we're looking at Diamond City, this creates 1 colorless mana, which is the wastes symbol.
Yes.
Which can be used to pay generic mana costs, which other colors can, but also can be used to pay for colorless mana. There's your little confusing tutorial about colorless versus generic. That was a very good distinction, Kelson. Speaking of really cool things, by the way, I just watched a video from Minute Magic about priority. Very cool, and it helped me learn a thing about priority that I did not know.
I would love to get a Minute Magic on the show to
that would be
teach
sick.
us about priority. That'd be really cool.
That would be tight. That would be fun to talk about stuff like that. Minute Magic, if you're watching, we'd love to collab. Send us an email. Next one is Diamond City. Kelson, you want to read Diamond City?
Yeah, it enters the battlefield with shield counter on it. It taps for colorless, and you can also tap it to move a shield counter from Diamond City onto target creature. You can only activate if 2 or more creatures entered the battlefield under your control this turn. I think this is good. I didn't know about this card until I was doing some research for this episode. I don't. Maybe I have this card. I don't know. I have 2 of the Fallout decks, and I don't know if this is in one of the ones that I have. I think it's really quite good. There's no downside other than it being a colorless land. I think most decks won't struggle to get 2 or more creatures onto the battlefield
in a single turn.
In a turn.
I think many decks will, but not a lot of decks. Like I think about the decks that I just built.
Yeah.
Like if I just built chiller versions of some of my favorite decks, Tasigur and Garth, and those probably get out a creature a turn.
But in Tasigur, you play Tasigur and then immediately pot him, and you've got 2 creatures.
Sure, and then I guess I just put... Yeah, that's
a
true.
Shield counter
I've
on
had
the
2
thing that you
creatures
just got out.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. If you're doing any pot effects, if you are doing
a token deck, it's really, really good. It can protect your token doubler.
Get you 2 creatures, which is kind of cool.
I think this goes in. I think this is a sum. I think
This is cool. I think it goes. Yeah, it probably doesn't go in most decks, but honestly, that's why I guess that's what I was arguing for, is that it probably doesn't go in like most decks, but it goes in
because it's colorless. Any deck could play it, and that's probably the reason why not every deck should, is because it's colorless. But like in creature heavy strategies and in like 2 colors or less, I think this card is quite good. I just think it's awesome to be able to just put a shield counter on my commander for free for 1 mana.
Yeah, I think the thing that's cool about this is you can do it at instant speed as long as 2 or more creatures have entered, which is kind of sick. And so you can do it in
actually, that's so sick because
you
don't have to. Oh, under your control. It does have to be under your control.
Under your control. Yeah, I did check that earlier.
Dang, that'd be sweet.
That'd be so busted if it was just entered the battlefield this turn.
Yeah. This is busted if you're in a proliferate deck too.
Oh yeah, because you just proliferate this, and then this goes in Atraxa decks for sure. Because you just proliferate those shields counters, and then Atraxa just gets a billion shield counters. I think what's sick about it though is like if like it enables a good attacks on some of your creatures, right? Like you can do it in response to someone, like you attack like somebody threatens, yo, I'm gonna remove your creature if you attack me, and you're like, okay, sick. You attack them, then they just waste remove. You do this in response to their removal. Which, by the way, the stack is sick. Magic is so cool. The stack is probably the coolest part about Magic, I think.
I do think that is one of the coolest parts about Magic, for sure.
Some, right, is what we think about this?
Yeah, I think it's some.
Diamond City. Great. Ooh, continuing our cycle of Kamigawa lands, which I forgot were legendary, and I think that's really cool that they are legendary, for the reasons you mentioned, that they do stuff that they will like trigger legendary or historic stuff. Eiganjo, Seat of the Empire is a legendary land that taps to add a white mana, or you can channel it, which we talked about channel earlier. You discard it from your hand. You pay 2 and a white, discard it, and it deals 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. It costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. This is this is good.
This is great. I play this in all my white decks.
Yep. Almost most decks that play white will want this.
Yeah.
Which is why we're going to put it in most. I don't think every deck that plays white, especially as you move up in colors, but most 2 to 3 color, I think, white decks will want to play Eiganjo. Potentially 4 color white decks, but I don't think 5 color white decks potentially want Eiganjo. Depends on what you're doing. When I'm playing 5 color decks, I often will play like a Cultivate or a Kodama's Reach, and then maybe 1 of each basic so that you can.
And the rest of them are like 2 or 3 color lands.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think that because those are the only single color lands that you're playing for the most part, I don't think you want to replace them with.
That's probably true.
But maybe you do.
They're also just
if you're,
interaction.
Yeah. If you're playing higher powers and you're not searching for any, you don't care about basics, then like replace a basic with this. Like that's really good.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one
Field
is
of
one
the
that
Dead.
I really want to play. I've never played it, and I really want to play it.
So
But
good.
you should read it for us.
Yeah, so Field of the Dead enters the battlefield tapped. It taps to add colorless mana. And whenever Field of the Dead or another land enters the battlefield under your control, if you control 7 or more lands with different names, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. I love this card because I love land decks. And unfortunately, I think this is pretty narrow to only lands decks.
So do I not put this in like a zombie deck that just like incidentally will create zombies for me?
I don't think so. I think hitting 7 lands with different names is harder than you think it is. And I think the downside of it entering tapped and only tapping for colorless can be kind of rough.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. In like a 2-color deck, how hard is it, do you think, to... I'm probably only playing like 15 or 20 non-basics, right? And so then... And then you put in like snow-covered lands if you're like a try-hard.
If you're really trying to get there. Yeah, but I mean, where this is really good is in lands decks, especially if you're recurring fetches from the graveyard. Because then you get...
wow.
You get a trigger when the fetch enters, and then you get another one when it...
That's
when
crazy.
The next one comes in. And then if you're playing multiple lands per turn, if you can do a fetch multiple times in a turn...
Wow, yeah.
Then you're making like 6 to 8 zombie creatures a turn.
Sure, but even like incidentally making like a zombie a turn on your land drop is like pretty decent.
I think if you made 1 zombie, you'd be very unhappy with this card. I don't think having it enter tapped and providing colorless mana for 7 turns potentially, I don't think that offsets getting like 1 zombie.
What if though
If this is your 7th land and you've hit perfect, then it's great.
Sure, because
you're not going to get it on every activation thereafter if you play basics.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, no, because each basic that you are playing.
Oh yeah, if you control, it's the 7th. Sure. Yes.
So that's the thing is like if
it's still hard though. By turn 7,
it depends on how many turns your games are going to and the power. Like, I think this probably shifts the number of decks this wants to be in as you move to higher powers, right? Because like in a low power like deck,
but also you have to be ramping lands because you have to have 7 lands with different names.
Sure, yeah. So like in a deck that doesn't care about lands, right? In like a 2-color zombie deck, you have to be extremely lucky to have not hit multiple basics, right?
Yeah.
Or one of each basic, right? So I'm thinking about my Dimir zombie deck, right?
Yeah.
I have to have hit one, like a basic, and then no more.
And then 5 non-basics.
5 non-basics.
And you have to get to 7, and you have to hit a land drop every turn for 7 turns.
For 7 turns, right. So
and then on turn 7, you get a 2/2.
At fastest, this turns on at turn 7. So what I'm saying is, though, in like a really low power zombie deck, for example, I just think Field of Dead is so cool. And in a very low power
I think it's so cool. It's one of my favorite cards. I love playing this card, but I also play a lot of land decks.
Sure, but in like a very low power zombie deck, for example, like where you're seeing 14 turns.
Then yes, this $30 land card is going to be good in your
Sick.
super low power zombie deck.
I'm with you now. Okay, if I'm playing a 3-color zombie deck, this is more likely to be good
because
in more higher colors. Because you have more,
but also worse because
it's not tapping for a color.
Enters tapped
for sure. I think I'm with you on that. I just want to.
This is another one that I think is a trap in cube. I think a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like this is it's a land. So I'm just going to slam it in my cube deck, and then it never ends up doing anything unless you're the lands deck in cube.
Right.
I think this is just like a trap because it's such a cool card, and then when you see it go off, you're like, holy crap, this card is powerful, because this card is super powerful. But I think it's narrowly powerful. I think there's a lot of setup you have to do to make this card really perform at its ceiling.
Okay. Yeah, so let's call it narrow then.
Yeah, I think it's narrow. But it is a cool card.
It's so sick. I just want to. It's one that I've seen since I started playing Magic and been like, that's so sick. I want to play it. I think it's probably when I think of like it probably doesn't go in like a 2. Like I'm thinking of zombie deck specifically because it does make zombies, and so that's relevant, right? I think if I were to put it in like if I made my CDC Brood Tyrant deck a zombie deck,
I was gonna say, are there green zombie decks? And yeah, in a green zombie deck, it's good.
It's like pretty solid.
Yeah,
I think. Anyway,
I think it is good.
But also,
I would definitely play in that deck.
Boseiju, not Boseiju, but Bojuka Bog, and so you're playing. If you're replacing more basics with non-basic,
they fill up quick.
That's what I'm saying.
Sure.
Maybe I'll put it in. No, just kidding. Don't do that. It's narrow. It goes in lands decks more than anything.
It also needs to get reprinted so badly.
Yeah, I think. Do you think it?
I don't think it's worth $30.
Is it an Innistrad? Is it an Innistrad land? Does it get reprinted in Innistrad?
20, I think, is where it came from.
Oh,
let's see.
Should we look? Switch printing. It came from
Core Set 2020.
Core Set 2020.
And it's only been in a secret lair drop and a special guest since then.
Is it?
And that secret lair drop is worth, or that specific secret lair was worth a ton. It was the whatever dead, the Restless Dead. What is it called?
I don't know. Interesting. Theoretically, it could be an Innistrad, I guess. So let's hope it's an Innistrad remaster reprint. I'm trying to think of when they would reprint it next. Anyway, all right, we're gonna cruise through. We have 44 left, so we gotta start cruising. Yep. Fountain Port is a land that taps for colorless. You can pay 2 to sacrifice a token to draw a card, pay 3 and tap it to, and pay a life to create a 1/1 blue fish creature token, and you can pay 4 and tap it to create a treasure token. This is doing really well in standard in like Azorius control decks, and I think in like mono red burn decks too, because you just like as you run out of cards, you're just like sick. I'll make a fish. Is this good in Commander?
I don't know if it's
because this is like, so we've been playing again Cube also. This seems to me like it's Retrofitter Foundry kind of, which is not very good in Commander, but is good in one-on-one formats as like, because that's what I've been thinking about a lot of these that like are lands plus, like a land plus that enters untapped is like sick in one-on-one formats that are like limited.
Yeah, the one I'm looking at though is like the draw card one.
Sure. So in a token deck.
It's really good in a token deck, but also just you can pay 4 mana if you don't do anything that. Like I think it's really good in control decks if you're keeping up mana to play instant speed.
Yeah,
and it's really good in token decks. It also makes the tokens itself, which you can block with at instant speed,
and then draw. So
well, you can't draw if you're blocking with.
Oh,
the fish.
so you make it at instant speed to block, but what I'm saying is you block with it and then draw at instant speed also, right? So like you make it on someone's end step and then you like block with it, draw a card. I think it's cool. I think some decks want this. I don't think every deck wants Fountain Port.
I would even say few, but the fact that it's colorless means it can go in so many decks, so it's probably some.
Yeah, some decks want Fountain Port. I think it's cool.
Yeah. Guy's Cradle. It's a legendary land. You tap, you add green to your mana pool for each creature you control. Yeah, goes in most green decks, I think.
Yeah, most, but that's the thing. It's narrow in the fact that it goes in like creature decks.
You need 2 creatures for this to be an ancient.
Yeah, it goes in most green decks. That's crazy. How about Gavany Township? This can only go in Selesnya decks because it taps for 1 colorless mana, or you can pay 2 and green white mana and tap it. So 5 mana total. Put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. That's like, okay. Again, there are cards that do this better and for cheaper. Right?
Okay, this is so much better than Castle Embreth, though.
Oh, for sure. For sure better than Castle Embreth. Yeah.
I feel like I wasn't really biting on Castle Embreth because +1/+0 is not great. 1/1 counter on each of my creatures is great.
Yeah, that's really good. And it's repeatable.
Good.
I actually had someone play this in a CEDH game, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, they were playing Tyam.
Oh, cool.
And so they had creatures out, and they just started pumping all of their creatures. And then
Crazy.
And they hadn't even played Tyam yet because they'd been playing a bunch of stacks, and eventually they got Tyam out, and they'd been attacking with like Archon of Emeria for like 7 damage or whatever because it was just getting pumped each turn. I think it's a good card. I think some decks want it. I
agree.
Some decks want it. Selesnya decks only. So you said earlier, so Selesnya decks only. So I'm never playing it.
Yeah. I was just looking at my decks. I was like, do I have a Selesnya deck I could put that in? And if not, do I need to build a Selesnya deck?
I think I have. I'm not kidding. 0 decks that play Selesnya,
except for your 5-color deck.
Except for sure. Yep, my 1 deck that plays Selesnya, because it has to be 5.
Because it has to. Hall of Heliod's Generosity is a legendary land. You tap to add colorless mana, or you can pay 1 and a white and tap it to put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. So this is the same thing as Academy Ruins, right?
Yep. Not Academy Ruins. Academy Ruins? Yeah, Academy Ruins. Yeah, you're right. Same thing as
But for
Academy Ruins.
enchantments.
But for enchantments, I think it's a sick card. This is one that I was on my list. I had a long time ago had a Verena Lich Queen zombies deck that I thought was sick. That I might want to bring back because I had built it. This was early on in my deck building career, and I think I could build it to be better and a thing I like more now. And it played a lot of cool enchantments. And I think this could be cool.
Is this more or less narrow than Academy Ruins?
Probably more narrow, and probably actually doesn't go in that deck, but it was one that I wanted in that deck because I thought it was cool. I think it probably... This is probably the same kind of trap as Field of the Dead, where like, oh, I have a cool enchantment that I want to get back, and so this will do it. It is Graveyard Recursion, which is cool. Repeatable Graveyard Recursion. You are probably only playing this in enchantment decks, right?
Probably. I think so. I mean, I think that there's a higher upside. Like, I'm trying to think like what artifact I get removed, and I'm like, oh, I'm now at a loss for having that artifact removed. Because like Soul Ring, sure. You mentioned Alheimer's Archive, Bolas' Citadel, maybe. And then like artifact creatures, like a really good artifact creature. But like enchantments is like Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, Smothering Tithe, Trouble in Pairs. Like those are the ones that I would want to spend a turn putting back on top of my deck, drawing, and then recasting.
Yeah. That's pretty good. I mean, there's also like with Academy Ruins, I guess it has to be blue, which makes it tough because like I was thinking there's like combo pieces in artifacts too. Like you're playing like your Phyrexian Altar and stuff like that. But
like in mono black or something.
Right, exactly. So I think Hall of Helios Generosity, I think there's enough crossover with really good enchantments and also
those tend to get removed more than the artifacts, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like the One Ring. Like the One Ring, if it gets destroyed, or I guess exile. It has to be destructible, so you're not getting it back anyways.
Sacrifice it, basically. Yeah. Right? Forced to sacrifice it. I think Hall of Helios Generosity is actually very cool. And I think goes in some... I think this is narrow in the fact in the sense that you probably want to play this in most enchantment decks. But I think it could probably go in just like non-enchantment decks in white and still be pretty happy, right?
Because the other thing it can get back is enchantment creatures, and Academy Ruins can get back artifact creatures. And enchantment creatures are probably...
I mean, this gets back to like sagas too, and class enchantments, and...
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I like this one better. I still think... So do you think it goes in some or few instead of narrow? Do you think it goes in some? Like, should I be just playing this in like white decks?
I think people should be playing this in just like some of their white decks. Like,
I'll try it.
Yeah,
I have it now because it came in the Miracle Worker precon, right?
Oh, sick! That's cool.
Yeah,
which is not an enchantment.
I can start trying it now. Miracle Worker is not an enchantment deck,
isn't it? Is it not?
I think it has an enchantment sub theme, doesn't it?
Oh,
isn't it enchantments get miracle? I'm pretty sure it gives your enchantments.
Oh, is it enchantment? Is it an enchantment deck? I thought it was just a miracle deck.
I can tell you right now.
It just happened to have
enchantment cards.
Oh, okay. Miracle. It is an enchantment deck. It just happened to also have Metamorphosis Fanatic. But is Metamorphosis Fanatic an enchantment creature?
No, I don't think so.
I'll tell you what I do want to put it in. For December, one of my brews that I really want to build is Narcy Fablesinger. And I think Narcy Fablesinger is way better now that like bargain is a thing. Cool. Because you can just like ditch an enchantment for additional benefit and you draw a card off of it. I think it's sick. Cool. Okay, the next one is High Market. High Market is a land that taps for a colorless mana, but you can also tap it to sacrifice a creature and you gain 1 life. This is just a free sack outlet on a land, which is cool.
But narrow to only decks that want sack outlets.
Yeah, narrow to decks that want sack outlets.
And also a lot of decks that want sack outlets want repeatable sacrifice outlets.
Yes.
And this is not.
This is not repeatable. But I will say, there are times when you're playing a Aristocrats deck or a sacrifice type deck where you don't have a sack outlet. But you need like something cares about creatures dying, right? You may have like a payoff, but you don't have a sack outlet, or you have a sack outlet and no payoff, which is kind of like worse. Where High Market is great because it's a land that stays on the battlefield as a sack outlet, so that you can trigger, like your sack outlay gets removed, and then you can trigger your payoff still or whatever. So
Sure.
like pretty sick. Here's one that I think no one should be playing. It is Homeward Path. Homeward Path taps for a colorless. You can tap it, and each player gains control of all creatures they own.
Okay, so I also don't think this goes in very many decks, but I'm having trouble knowing if it should go in few or narrow, because I do think, like in a narrow deck, like in a deck where you're giving stuff away that you do want back, then this is really powerful in that strategy.
Sure, but most decks that are giving stuff away, we had talked about. I was like, hey, maybe Beamtown Bullies. You like get your leveler back,
Sure, or
but
Zedru or whatever.
Right, but your point was, you don't want the stuff back in Beamtown Bullies, and in the Zedru, I don't know which. There a lot of the decks that I know of that like are giving people stuff are like giving you a benefit if they are attacking with that stuff, or like if I guess Zedru is just giving people stuff and like you're doing stuff for the amount of things people own that are yours.
Yeah.
I think this is just bad. I think Homeward Path is just bad.
Okay.
It's so
hear me out.
narrow that no decks should play it.
Hear me out. Scrambleverse.
What is Scrambleverse? No, bad.
It's an 8-mana sorcery that for each non-land permanent you choose a player at random and they gain control of that permanent.
Okay, sick. So you Scrambleverse and then just Homeward Path and everyone gets everything back.
Yep. Okay, yeah, I think it's probably just few, right? I mean, like, yeah, I think it's just
yeah. Should we have made a no?
No, it's fine.
No
It goes in few. I'm sure there's one deck out there that really wants.
Okay.
I'm sure someone's gonna scream at us in the comments, be like, "Homeward Path is the best card in my deck because it does this one."
Because I hate getting my creatures stolen by my opponents, and I want them back. Because I one time got briberied and someone got my Consecrated Sphinx, so now I run Homeward Path. I run Homeward Path, and I also run crop rotation so that I can get my Homeward Path.
Okay, but in a monocolor deck, there's like almost no downside, right?
Okay. Let me take a step back with Homeward Path.
I feel like I need to look up on EDHREC like what people are playing Homeward Path in, so because I'm sure that it's a $7 land. I'm sure there's like some deck that it's really good.
Okay,
in.
so this is what happens: is people play against what's the card? Lochthwain Scorn is the adventure. What is the actual card?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Whatever it's
Virtue
called.
of Persistence.
Virtue of Persistence, right?
Yeah.
Or the other one that we talk about that's in
or
Orzhov Killers
or whatever.
Shieldred or
Netter's,
what or like
Debtor's Knell.
Yeah, Debtor's Knell, and then Rise of the Dark Realms or whatever, and they're like, yeah, now I get my stuff back because I hate that. But like, it is so like that is such a specific scenario. Hopefully,
I will say, if someone in our play group played Scrambleverse, I would just put this card in my deck so that we could avoid the Scrambleverse. Because Scrambleverse sounds horrible to resolve.
Yeah, but then you don't. Here's the thing, though, is you still have to resolve Scrambleverse. And
no. I would just be like, we're shortcutting this. I'm playing Homeward. I'm tapping Homeward Path right now.
Okay, sure. Yeah. All right. It's bad. Few decks. Next, Inkmoth Nexus.
Okay, this one's cool. This taps for a colorless. You can also just pay 1 to make it a 1/1 artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. It's still a land. I think this is really, really cool in +1/+1 counter decks because you make a big infect creature, or like narrow decks like Baba the Saga or Black Panther that just synergize really well with this. I think it's narrow, but I think it's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. Very cool land. Very powerful land.
I mean, it's also just like a really good creature land. So is it like some? Like, do you just play this in because it's like a good creature land?
I think
it's like
I think some. So here's the thing: is like even if you're playing something that like cares about dealing combat damage, you just for 1 mana this becomes a land.
Okay, does it deal? I forget for infect.
It does. It deals combat damage, but it deals damage
in the form of.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably some. This is also another one that I'd really love a reprint of, so I can pick one up.
Yeah, it's sick. Inventor's Fair. I would call narrow, but we haven't read it yet. So it's a legendary land. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 3 or more artifacts, you gain 1 life, which is cool. Taps for a colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, put it into your hand. only if you control 3 or more artifacts. So it has Metalcraft for both of those things, right? This is a cool tutor on a land. This is an artifact tutor on a land, which is very good, but it's very narrow. You're playing this on artifact.
I think it's narrow.
Yep.
Because you have to have an artifact that you're willing to spend 4 mana and go down an additional land.
So go get. Right. Effectively 5 mana because you're tapping this too.
Yeah.
I think that's one thing to keep in mind too with these costs that I often forget as I look at it and think, wow, like 4 mana.
Only 2 mana to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, that's not bad, but it's 2 mana and tapping your land. And so you got to make sure you count this not as that mana.
Yep.
Next one here is Kessig Wolf Run.
I love this card.
Why? Read it. Tell me.
It taps for colorless. You can pay X, red, green, and tap it, and target creature gets +X/+O and gains trample until end of turn. I think the fact that it gains trample is what makes this really good. Because you just have a big creature. And I like playing big creature decks. And if I don't have a really great play in my hand and I can just take out a player that turn by just pumping my creature, then I can do it for that turn. I can put 8 mana into this, give my creature +6/+O and trample.
Yeah, the thing to remember about utility lands is that they don't cost you a card, which is like huge. So even though it's like under rate for like giving a creature trample, it is virtually free except for the mana. That
You could just play red, green, tap and give it trample.
So for 3 mana, you're giving a creature trample. You could probably do that for 1 mana if you spent a card to do it.
I mean, there's cards that cantrip that give your creature trample for 1 mana, right? Like Crash Through. Doesn't Crash Through give your creature...
Oh, sure. And it might cantrip. Yeah, so like in that sense, Crash Through is just like strictly better than Kessig Wolf Run, but then you also have to play Crash Through.
Yeah, and that's a card in your deck, and this is a land slot.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is better. So I think
some.
there's some decks, that want this. Yeah. It's not so narrow. Maze of Ith is one that I don't understand why people run. It is a land. I keep giving spoilers about. I keep giving my review before we read it. Maze of Ith is a land that does not tap for mana, but it taps to untap target attacking creature and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt by that creature this turn.
Okay, so this does go in narrow decks that care about attack triggers and want to protect the creatures after they've attacked.
Sure.
Because you can attack, get the attack trigger, and then remove it from combat if someone decides to block it so you don't lose the creature.
Yep.
It's also narrow in the sense that it's a combo piece. And you can create infinite mana with this, and there are a few other cards that let you create
only during
mana.
the attack step, I guess, right? You can create infinite mana during your attack step.
Yes. Luckily, so my favorite one, which is Ley Weaver, has partner with Lore Weaver, which is an infinite mana outlet to draw cards.
Gotcha. So you create infinite mana in your attack step, at instant speed, you draw.
And you can draw your deck.
Yep. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So that's super cool. It's one of my favorite.
And I guess it has the utility of like it's like protection on a land, repeatable
yes,
protection.
And so I was going to say, like, not narrowly, this also always protects you from unattacking creature each combat.
So when I think of Maze of Ith, I think of like the command zone, and I feel like every command zone game I watched had a Maze of Ith hit the battlefield.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Or something like that.
I don't play it that often.
This screams Legacy Commander to me. Like 10 years ago, I would think every Commander deck was playing Maze of Ith. Now, with the amount of like quality, like we've already talked about, I don't know, have we talked about a dozen lands? We're probably not talking, but we've talked about a ton of lands that I would play before Maze of Ith.
So the other place this is really good that we should mention is if you have a Yavimaya or an Urborg that turns this into a forest or swamp, so then it does tap for mana.
Sure. Yeah.
And that is really good. So I do think it's like probably few or some or narrow. I think it could fit in any of those. Bottom line, this shouldn't be in most decks. Like this, you either putting it in your narrow deck for a combo or a synergy, or you're just putting it in few decks because it prevents something from attacking you. So I think it could be either narrow or few, and I wouldn't be mad about either.
I'll call it few. I think it's.
I think I play it in 2 decks because of either a combo or a synergy.
Ideally, it does like all of those things, right? Like that's sick. If it's saving you from being attacked, you're getting attack triggers off of it. you can give a creature vigilance, which is kind of cool. You untap it at the end of combat after it's dealt damage, which is kind of cool.
But
And
also,
it's
like reconnaissance is just like the better version of that, right?
Sure, but it also takes up a slot, and so if
no, but this does too. It's not a land. It doesn't tap for mana.
Right,
You
it is
cannot
not a
put
land.
this as a land slot. Like this, you have to treat this as a spell.
Yep,
It's basically a 0-mana enchantment.
0-mana enchantment. That's
unless you have Yava
a 0-mana enchantment that takes up actually a land drop on your turn. It's not a 0-mana enchantment. It is
it's a 1-mana
skip
enchantment.
a land drop enchantment. It is 1 mana.
That is
not factorial, but whatever it is to add 1 mana for the rest of the
Yeah.
game that you lose.
Compounds.
Yeah. In any case, few decks want this one. This card, I think, I'm not going to give a spoiler on. We're going to read. This card, I think we're going to read, and then we'll talk about it. It is Manamo, School at Water's Edge. It is a legendary land that taps for a blue mana, so only blue decks can play this. But you can pay a blue and tap it to untap target legendary permanent. I have some decks I want to play this in that I'm not currently playing in any decks. It's kind of an expensive one. This needs a reprint.
Yep. The wasn't it a Lord of the Rings box
Oh,
topper?
yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that wasn't enough.
Not enough. I will say this is being currently played in CDH because it untaps the One Ring.
I was gonna say the One Ring. Like I think if you have like legendary synergies, or is Gaia's Cradle a legendary land?
I think it is. Yep.
Yeah, if you're running Gaia's Cradle, you should be running this, I guess. I feel like you have to have something specific that you want. It's not good enough just to untap your commander unless it has a synergy, right?
Sure. I mean, like, I'm considering playing this in Garth.
It'd be good in Garth.
Land. Yeah. Because I also play other legendary creatures, though, that want to untap,
that have taps
right?
and untap synergies. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like Glarb, right? If your commander, this is not good enough unless your commander is tapping for like a powerful effect, right? Or you have
Would you
legends.
consider that even narrow then, or is that just like there's quite a few, like some commanders?
I think this is narrow. I think Manama is very narrow.
Okay.
Like outside of that, this is giving your commander vigilance, which is not like what you want to be doing.
For 2 mana.
Yeah, for 2 mana. Yeah.
So Minas Tirith enters the battlefield. It's a legendary land. It enters tapped unless you control a legendary creature, and I think that's the case for all of the Lord of the Rings cycle. Mm-hmm. It taps to add white, and then you can pay 1 and a white to tap it to draw a card. You can activate only if you attacked with 2 or more creatures this turn.
This is sick. I think Minas Tirith is very good.
I will say that with this cycle, I've noticed that it's harder to make it enter untapped than some of the other like untapped
sure.
if you control a planes or like whatever. It's harder to control a legendary creature when this enters.
Yeah, that's true. This does much better in like low CMC commander decks where you're guaranteed to have, like, if you're playing this in a what's her name Yoshimaru, right? Like this will enter untapped, and especially in like Yoshimaru and Giada, you'll be able to attack with creatures. I guess Giada, you're wanting to tap to cast angels or whatever, but 3 mana effectively to draw a card on a land is pretty solid. It's like really good. Again, this reads as 2 mana draw a card, which to me even like is crazier. You have to tap this to draw the card, so it effectively costs 3 mana. But 2 mana and tapping this is not bad.
I think it's some.
Yeah, some decks will want this for sure. Most white decks will want it. I think most mono white decks will want it. That's like sick card draw.
Most mono white probably.
Not that mono white is hurting for card draw anymore these days.
They're good options now.
Mortuary White
Mire. Yeah, go ahead and read that.
It enters tapped. When it enters the battlefield, you put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library, and it taps for a black mana. We were just kind of singing the praises of Hall of Heliod Generosity and Academy Ruins.
But you like this one less, don't you?
But I like this one less. But it's because it blanks your next draw, which those both do. But this does it just when it ETBs. Those ones you can kind of choose when you want to do it. So you could play Hall of Helios Generosity on turn 2 or whatever, and then on turn 7 get your thing back when you want to draw it. But Mortuary Mire is, hey, when this enters, put that creature on top. And if you have no creatures, bummer. If you have a creature, but you maybe want something to try to see if you can find something else, bummer.
I think it's few.
I think few decks want this one. Dope. Mosswort Bridge.
Yeah, so this is one of the hideaway lands. There's one for each color. I think this and the red one are the two that are most seen in Commander. The black one I think is pretty much unplayable. I think each player has to have empty hands to trigger the hideaway for the black one.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so Mosswort Bridge is hideaway 4. So you look at the top 4 cards when this enters of your library, and you exile one of them face down, and you put the rest on the bottom of your library. And it enters the battlefield taps for green. And if you pay green and tap it, you can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost, but only if you the creatures you control have a total power of 10 or greater, which honestly isn't too hard to make happen in Commander.
No, that's not hard. This is good. I think
It's pretty good.
Most creature-based green decks want this, which is not a stretch to say that like most decks will want this if they're playing green, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's at least some, if not most.
Yeah, I would say most, just because I can't, like, what green deck are you playing that's not, I guess, Teamer? Like, you might be playing, like, Calamax, but even then, like, Calamax gets bigger.
Calamax gets big. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a tapped green land.
Yeah.
That's the only downside to it.
Sure. I think it's pretty good. I think we'll call that one most. Mystic Sanctuary is our next one. It is a land island. It is an island, which is cool. Taps for a blue mana because it is an island. When it enters the battlefield, tapped, unless you control 3 or more other islands. So it has to be your 4th island to enter untapped. But when it does enter untapped, you may put an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard on top of your library. This one is a combo piece a lot of the time.
This is a combo piece. I think it's pretty good in mono blue. You can get back like a counterspell to keep protection in your hand or something like that. I have found it very difficult to play to get the trigger when you want the trigger, unless you're specifically building your deck to have enough islands and to be able to combo with it. I think it's powerful, but I think it probably still goes in few decks, realistically.
I would say few. I play this. I have an Azami Lady of Scrolls deck because I was trying to build a monocolor
really
deck.
Azami.
And you play that with like Oboro Breeze Color that bounces lands and an extra turn spell. So then you just start taking infinite turns with that. I don't think... it is an island. It is a tapped island. It is like objectively worse than an island unless you are playing... I think Mono Blue wants it. Speaking of monocolors, let's talk about Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. It is a legendary land that taps for a colorless mana, or you can pay 2 mana and choose a color, and you add mana to your mana pool equal to your devotion to that color. Mana of that color. I read that very poorly. If you add mana to your mana pool equal to your of that color equal to your devotion of that color, I guess, right? I still said that not very well.
Yeah, so if you have 3 green pips on permanents you control, and you pay 2 and tap this and choose green, you get 3 green. So you've basically just filtered your mana into green. So this is mostly played in monocolor decks.
Mm-hmm. And 4 is the number again, right?
4 is the number that you need. That's really good in monocolor decks.
Yeah, it's insane in monocolor decks.
Yeah.
Especially decks like monocolors that have lots of pips, which...
Yeah.
To me...
monocolor.
Yeah,
but especially like black.
Black to me screams like pretty high pip colors. And I think green also has that, but I've mostly seen this in black decks weirdly because black is just like there's a lot of black in colors that you're paying or triple black.
So what do we call? Is it narrow?
This is narrow.
You're only
playing in monocolor decks. Yeah.
Okay.
Narrow.
Odawara.
Soaring City.
Yeah, so it's a legendary land. It taps for blue. This is the next in our cycle of channel lands from Neon Dynasty. It has channel for 3 and a blue. Discard Odawara. You return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. It costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. This is the second best one after Boseiju, right? Because Boseiju is just interaction. It's just removal. This is a bounce. But
which is removal,
but you can also save your own stuff.
Yeah. It's removal.
Do you play Boseiju or Odawara more, do you think?
I play more blue than green. So,
I think that's probably me too, where I'm like, I think I have this in more decks, but but that's just because I have more blue, I think, in decks than green.
Yeah, I think so too. I think they're both quite good. The thing I have to remember is like I look at this 3 and a blue, and I was thinking about this because of a card we're going to look at later, which is Sokenzan, which is the red, or Sokenzan. I don't know how you'd say it. It's 3 and a red. This is 3 and a blue. It seems like a lot, and then you discount it because maybe you have your commander out or whatever, and 3 mana to bounce any permanent is not an uncounterable bounce of any permanent is not bad.
It's really good.
I do think Bosage is better because it's 1 mana to remove that permanent, and it does ramp them, right?
Sure. It doesn't get a creature though.
But it doesn't get a creature, which this does do, and this also hits planeswalkers.
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk too much about its most. I mean,
It's most blue decks will play this. The next one is Peat Bog, which is a representation of the depletion lands, which are freaking sick in specific decks and probably in higher power. It is a land. I'm still talking about it before we read it. It is a land that enters tapped with 2 depletion counters on it, and you can tap it to add a depletion counter, or remove a depletion counter, and add 2 black mana to your mana pool. And if there are no depletion counters on it, you sacrifice it. So this is, again, a cycle of them. This one adds black mana. The Sandstone Needle is one that adds red. I don't know if it's a full cycle. It might just be...
I don't either.
Might just be those
I've
two.
never played these. I know they're good, though. I just haven't played them.
I play this in my CDH deck. You mostly play this in CDH in black because you want to get like a turn 2 Necropotence. And this will do that because it enters tapped and then adds 2 black mana. What is also cool about this is it will sacrifice itself and fill your graveyard if you care about that. It adds 4 mana over the 2 turns that you tap it. And so
you take 1 turn off, though, because it enters tapped.
Yeah, sure. So over 3 turns, it adds 4 mana, and then thereafter, it adds 0. So you're netting, I guess, a mana, which is...
Does that make this narrow? Like, you have to care about either turboing something out or wanting to sacrifice it or being able to proliferate depletion counters. Like, do you have to have one of those narrow use cases for this to actually make it into your deck?
I think so. Yeah, I think so for sure. Yep. So we'll call this narrow. But it's pretty good.
The next one is Phyrexian Tower. This is a legendary land. You tap to add colorless or tap and sacrifice a creature to add black.
I would call this one also narrow.
Me too.
But it's very good in the decks that narrowly want it. This is like high market plus, right? High market, just like you tapped it to sacrifice a creature to gain a life. And this one you tap to sacrifice a creature to just give you mana. That's pretty darn good.
It is really good.
Yeah, and it taps. I mean, the fact that it taps, I forget this about Phyrexian Tower all the time because it is part of the same cycle of Gaia's Cradle and Tellurian Academy and the one we're going to talk about in a second here, Serra Sanctum, that tap for for the number of things you control, but don't tap for a colorless outside of that. This one will tap for mana if you don't have any creatures, but then just also will be a sack outlet that taps for 2.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty sick. I think
you'll notice we're not going to talk about the red one in that cycle because it is not good.
Because it is poopy. But this one is very good, and I think narrow is probably where this one belongs, right?
I agree. Yeah, this one's an interesting one. This is Pit of Offerings. It's a cave. It enters tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, you exile up to 3 target cards from graveyards. It taps for colorless, and it can also tap to add 1 mana of any of the exiled cards' colors. So it doesn't exile an entire graveyard, but you could exile a threat from each of your opponent's graveyards, and then it could also tap for up to 3. Actually, it could tap for up to 5 colors, because if you exile a multicolor permanent, then it can tap for any of those colors. So
that's pretty cool. I think it's good. This is one I might consider playing over Bojuka Bog. Bojuka Bog has the benefit of exiling an entire graveyard, but there's like a world where you are getting an early Bojuka Bog and hitting like just not very much. And I guess there's also a world where you play Pit of Offerings early and no one has anything in their graveyard and it's tapping.
That is a bummer. Then it's a colorless land. Yeah.
This one I would say is probably some. Where do we put Bojuka Bog? Probably goes with.
We put it in most. Right? I think we put Bojuka Bog in most.
Then I would call this one some.
I agree. I agree. I haven't played with this one yet. So if you have played with it, let us know in the comments how it plays. If it's as good as Bojuka Bog or better. I don't know.
Yeah, the fact that it color fixes you is really good. So I think later in a game, it has the
Later in a
upside,
game, this just seems really good.
Yeah, it has the upside of tapping for more colors because you can potentially hit more colors. You can hit multiple opponents' graveyards, which is good to hit multiple threats. The downside is you can hit a maximum of 3 cards from a single player's graveyard. And if someone's playing a graveyard strategy, and the best thing to do is just get rid of their entire graveyard, and Bojuka Bog will do that. So I don't think you're playing.
But it fixes colors, and if you're not playing against a dedicated graveyard strategy, then it's better.
Yeah.
So it kind of just depends on like your meta a little bit.
Yeah, I would still call it some because I think it's
I agree.
some because it can go in any deck, whereas Bojuka Bog can only go in black decks, and most black decks should just replace the swamp with Bojuka Bog.
I agree. Reliquary Tower. It is a land. You have no maximum hand size. It taps out of colors. I know you're not supposed to play this very often.
Don't play this.
I play this a lot.
This is not a good land, I don't think.
Can I tell you why I play it?
Yeah, why?
So when I draw my entire deck, I can just drop this as my land drop for the turn, and I don't have to discard.
Sure.
I know this card's not very good.
Don't play this card. Here's the thing. Discarding to hand size is not bad. There are times when you have no maximum hand size, and you're like, oh, sick, I have no maximum hand size. But for the most part, I don't think you're sad to have a maximum hand size.
The reason this is so tempting is because it's a land. I know you're not supposed to play Thought Vessel.
But Thought Vessel ramps you. And
but there's better 2-mana rocks that actually fix your colors. And I think the color fixing is probably more valuable than not having a maximum hand size. But this is a land.
So why are you playing Reliquary Tower if color fixing is better than not having a maximum hand size?
Because in monocolor or 2-color, this is good, right?
So would Thought Vessel be, and Thought Vessel ramps you.
You're probably right. I know I'm not supposed to play this, but I can't help myself. I play this one a lot.
Yeah, boo on Reliquary Tower. I think few decks should play Reliquary Tower.
I think that's probably true.
Sorry. I've stopped playing it. I heard forever ago in a podcast, someone was like, don't play Reliquary Tower. It's not good. And ever since then, I was like, yeah. And I've never missed having a Reliquary Tower.
I know.
When you have had a Reliquary Tower, and I'm like, discard to hand size, you're like, no. I'm like, oh, cool. But it's not like, oh no, like the game's over.
It feels so good to draw like half your deck though, and then not.
Sure, but if you're drawing half your deck, you should be winning anyway. Like Reliquary Tower is not gonna. It's a win more card, I think.
Yeah, depends on what's in that half of your library.
Yeah, sure. The next one is Rivendell. It is a legendary land. Lots of legendary lands, which matter sometimes. We've discovered. When it enters the battlefield, it enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. We talked about this with. The other one we talked about, which was Minas Tirith, less likely to enter untapped than some of the ones that check for land types. But it does tap for a blue, only playing this in blue decks, and you can pay 1 in a blue to tap it to scry 2, but only if you control a legendary creature, which is not bad. 3 mana scry 2 is not great, but in a deck that cares about scrying, I would call this one narrow.
I think this one's good. I don't even think you have to care about scrying. I think it just goes in some decks.
Okay, call it some. I do like this whole cycle of lands, so I'd be happy to put them all in some.
Well, yeah. I mean, we like these two the most.
We like these two and the next one we're going to talk about as well. Some. Did I... Why is it tagged as untagged lands? It's so dumb that I can do that. Rogue's Passage is our next one. It is a land that taps for colorless. You can pay 4 mana and tap it, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. Isn't there a strictly better version of this?
Well, Access Tunnel is for 3 mana, but I think it's only for small creatures.
Oh, I see.
Rogue's Passage, I think, is the one that can unconditionally do it.
Oh, there's the one that also taps for colorless, but you sacrifice it, but it can also like fetch.
That's the strictly better Evolving Wilds.
Right,
that one
exactly.
Is, forget Escape Tunnel, I think is what it's called.
Cool.
I like this one if I care about doing combat damage with a creature.
Yeah, this is one that sneaks up on you. That aptly so being Rogue's Passage. That
it ends games.
Yeah. Someone play an early Rogue's Passage, and then
there's
so many times that I've been playing a game, and I have luckily, I feel like, not been caught off guard by Rogue's Passage very often, because I've somehow sniped it and been like, oh, wait, they have a rogue's passage. Like, I could just, like, die if they attack me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is the type of thing that will catch you off guard. I think it's good. I think some decks want this.
I think some.
The next one is Sarah's Sanctum. It is a legendary land. Taps for... You can tap it and add 1 white mana for each enchantment you control. Not as good as our friend Gaia's Cradle.
Yeah, it's really good, but it doesn't produce mana until you have enchantments. And
Yes.
that is so much harder to do than creatures.
For sure.
Yeah.
The next one here is one that I'm excited about. Will you read this one, Kelson?
Yeah, Shifting Woodland. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control forest. It taps for green, and it has Delirium, which means that you can only activate if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyard. 2 green. Shifting Woodland becomes a copy of target permanent in your graveyard until end of turn.
You don't even have to tap this.
No. Well, I mean, it wouldn't really work very well if you tapped it. But
I mean, it could. You could tap it for green, and it becomes like an enchantment or something, right?
sure. Oh, yeah, because it hits any permanent.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
pretty good.
So again, this is my CH bias is coming in here, but like I had somebody discard a Bolus of Citadel and then turn this into an uncounterable Bolus of Citadel.
Sick.
Right?
That's cool.
Or like an uncounterable Necropotence or something. Like it's
Yeah. I mean, and the downside is it enters tapped unless you control forest. So this goes in most green decks.
Yeah, this is a sick card. I think most decks want to play Shifting Woodland.
Shizo Death Storehouse is a legendary land. Taps to add black. You can also pay black and tap it to give target legendary creature fear until end of turn.
Honestly, this is not one I think about. I think some decks want to play this.
Why wouldn't a black deck want to play this instead of a basic?
You don't care about dealing combat damage with your legendary creature. Here's the thing that's cool is you can give your opponent's legendary creatures fear. So you can just be like, hey,
I'll give it fear if you attack them.
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, maybe most decks want to play Shizo, and I just have not been playing Shizo for some reason.
I think it's very good. Yeah, I don't have a reason to not want to play this card.
Boom. Most decks want to... We're discovering things. We want to play this one. Speaking of discovery, I'm doing spoilers again, but this is one that I want to play more, and it is Sokenzan, Crucible of Defiance. It is a legendary land that taps for a red. It's part of the channel cycle from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. You pay 3 in a red and discard it, which is how you channel, and you create 2 1/1 colorless spirit creature tokens. They gain haste until end of turn. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature you control. This is one I'm not playing in like Aristocrats and Sacrifice decks, and probably should be, because it is 3 mana, create 2 1/1s that you can then just like throw away.
4 mana that if you have a commander out, it'll be 3 mana.
Yeah, I just am assuming that I'm going to have a commander out when I'm doing this, or a
They
legendary
also have
creature out.
haste.
Yeah,
They don't have
it's
flying,
good.
but they have haste. I mean, I think every land from this cycle is a most. I mean, they're just so good.
They're so insane.
This one though is at its best if you can utilize the tokens.
For sure. Absolutely.
Soulstone Sanctuary is a land. It taps to add colorless. You can pay 4 mana, and it becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. It's still a land. So this is kind of a placeholder for a lot of the creature lands. We did talk about Inkmoth Nexus specifically, but in general, there's a little bit of flexibility that you get with the creature lands. Some of the creature lands are better. I think this is one of the newer, more interesting, and potentially better ones, because for 4 mana, it permanently becomes a 3/3 creature with vigilance and all creature types. That's still a land.
Yeah, the fact that it doesn't see till end of turn is crazy. I didn't really notice that until you pointed that out to me. I've been playing a lot of Standard, and this is doing really well in Standard. But I do think, again, in like the same thing with some of these lands that have activated abilities that are not cheap, right? In terms of like they're above rate for what you want to pay for this effect. Like this is very good in a 1v1 format where you're like stalling out, and you're like, hey, listen,
super good.
I played this land, and now I can just start attacking you. And especially I think, honestly, in some cases, the ones that are temporary creature lands are better because they're harder to interact with, right? On my turn,
Sure.
I turn to do a creature, and then on your turn, it's no longer a creature, so you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, but this one, This one you can turn into a creature, attack, draw a card with Kindred Discovery, and then still use it for mana because it has
all
vigilance.
creature types is crazy. That's so good.
I think that's the fact that it's vigilant, all creature types, it's permanent, and you can still use it for mana. I mean, like what is not to absolutely love about this card? It's a land.
Yeah, so is it still kind of narrow because you care about because it like
You want it to probably care about creature types,
yeah.
I guess.
I'm not playing this in every deck. I'll tell you that right now.
No.
Like I think I'll
it's still
put
a
this.
colorless land at best.
Sure, I think I'll put it in typal decks though.
Yeah,
Right?
so let's call it narrow. That's fine.
Strip Mine is a land that taps for a colorless mana or taps and sacrifices to destroy a target land.
So this is really good in 1v1.
Yeah.
Less good in Commander.
Let's get a commander, though.
Unless you're recurring it.
Unless you're doing really mean stuff with Strip
Yeah.
Mine.
I'm going to call it narrow.
Let's call it narrow. Yep. We have Wasteland down here too. Can we call
Yeah, that's
Wasteland
also narrow
as well?
It's the same.
Cool. The last one in our Kamigawa cycle, Takanuma Abandoned Mire. Kelson.
Legendary land. Taps for black. Channel 3 and a black. Discard Takanuma Abandoned Mire. Mill 3 cards, then return a creature or planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. Costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature control. Great. It's most. I mean, it doesn't have to. Notably, the creature or planeswalker does not have to be one of the cards that was milled. It can just be any of them from your graveyard.
Oh, that's cool. I think I always read that wrong. I think I always thought it had to be from among the milled cards, which is
No, this makes it way better.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Better than I thought. Still, I think maybe the worst, or tied for Sokensan for the worst.
Really?
Of this cycle.
I have this one at number 3.
Really above
I have
the white.
Boseiju, Odawara, Takanuma, and then the white one and the red one.
I thought the white one's removal though.
Yeah, it's damage based removal. It has to be an attacking creature, right?
Or blocking creature.
Or blocking creature.
Sure. Yeah, okay. That's
know.
pretty good.
I like my
it.
creatures more than I hate my opponent's creatures.
True. That's good. Remove tag.
This is a new one.
This is a cool one. Talgates of Madara is a land gate, which is relevant. Enters the battlefield. When it enters the battlefield, it enters untapped, which is cool. When it enters the battlefield, up to one target creature phases out. It taps for a colorless. You can pay 1 to filter into 1 mana of any color, and you can pay 4 mana to put it from your hand onto the battlefield.
Okay. The crazy parts about this, it counts as interaction because you can instant speed as an ability, put it onto the battlefield for 4 mana to phase something out. It also is ramp when you do that because you're getting an extra land that turn. And you can use it to phase out one of your creatures to keep it safe, or phase out an opponent's creature to get it off the board during your turn, or whichever turn you decide to use the ability to put it out.
That's insane. This goes in every day.
It's crazy. It's nuts. It's so
and
good.
it enters untapped. So when
Yeah.
you pay the mana, it doesn't cost 5 mana like other ones. It's 4 mana. And I would call it 3 mana. It's a 3 mana ability, right? You have to have 4 mana to do it, but you're getting refunded by
back.
having this. You get 1 back.
Not to mention it ramps you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, this card's nuts.
Yeah, Talon Gates of
It's
Madara.
so
I
good.
should have bought one when it was cheaper. At one point, it was like $5 or something, right?
Was it really? Yeah,
I don't know. It's insane, though. The next one here is one you added, Tarnation Vista.
Yeah, not totally sure that it belongs here. Maybe we should have put this in the multicolored one, but it enters the battlefield tapped. But as it enters, you do choose a color. It can tap for 1 mana of the chosen color. It can also, you can pay 1 mana and tap it, and for each color among monocolored permanents you control, you can add 1 mana of that color. So if you have 3 monocolored permanents out, this will net you a mana.
Interesting.
So it
Does
really only
colorless
works
count
in
as
3 plus.
monocolor? No.
No, but it has to be a 3+ color deck.
Yeah, I think it's decent. The problem
I
is
think in 4 and 5 it's pretty good.
Yeah, but a lot of cards you're playing in 4 or 5 color decks are also like multicolor cards. I don't know.
I think it depends.
In my decks, I guess.
Sure. I think it depends. I think it's still probably few,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's bad. It also the fact that it fixes you for the color of your choice when it enters seems good.
Yeah, I would call this some. I think I could
Okay.
I could be convinced to make this some. Okay. Next one. Temple of the False God is a land that taps for 2 colorless mana, but you can only activate it if you control 5 or more lands.
Don't play this card.
It feels so good when it's your 5th land.
Oh. Yeah, but I was stuck on it as my 4th land for multiple turns the other day because I was playing a precon that had this in it, and it feels way worse.
That blows.
Yeah.
It's a worse Mazavith. It's a Mazavith that doesn't do anything.
Oh. Yeah,
Okay,
don't play this card.
Few decks should play this one. We are on to our next land in our cycle for the Lord of the Rings cycle, which is the Shire. It is a legendary land. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a legendary creature. Par for the course with these ones. It taps for a green, only playing this in green decks. And you can pay 1 and a green and tap it, and tap an untapped creature you control to create a food token. That's a pretty high cost for creating food. I like this one. This one has saved my butt in some decks, in some green control decks.
Yeah. You do have to tap an untapped creature.
Yeah, that's worse than the other ones. I'd
Yeah.
say few decks want this one. Food decks want
Probably
it
few.
for sure.
Yeah, it's going in my food deck.
Yeah, baby.
It's on the list. Thespian Stage. It's a land. It taps for colors. You can pay 2 and tap it, and it becomes a copy of target land, except it has this ability. I'm going to say it's either narrow or few because this is really mostly just a combo piece for Dark Depths.
I would call it narrow. I think narrow to me speaks to the fact that you want
There's
it for
like
a
one
specific
deck
thing.
that it goes in.
Yeah, exactly. But like you're not just throwing this in a deck because.
Sure.
Treasure Vault, I think, probably is the same sort of thing. It's an artifact land, which matters in artifact decks.
Yeah.
It taps for a colorless, which matters in artifact decks. And you can pay XX, tap it, and sacrifice it to create X treasure tokens, which can matter in artifact decks to get more artifacts.
To make more artifacts.
Yeah.
So narrow.
Narrow.
Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. Each land, it's a legendary land. Each land is a swamp in addition to its other land types. I mean, like, this does replace a swamp, right? Because it is a swamp.
Yeah.
It just isn't fetchable as a swamp.
It's not fetchable as a swamp. It does replace a swamp. It works with Cabal Coffers. And the one we didn't talk about, Cabal Stronghold, except it doesn't work with Cabal Stronghold because Cabal Stronghold is only basic swamps. I think it is narrow for that purpose.
Does it work with Cabal Stronghold to turn your other basic lands into basic swamps?
Whoa, interesting. Yeah, probably, actually. That's cool. I didn't think about that. The thing about Urborg, though, is it basically only works in that scenario. I mean, it does fix you, right? It turns your islands into swamps in like a 2-color deck, right? Which is cool. The reason I've stopped playing Urborg, I think I still play it, but the reason I've considered stopping playing it is that I will play other lands before this when it's in my hand to prevent mana fixing my opponents that are in black, right?
Because it makes their Cabal Coffers really good.
Yeah, right. Or it just like gives them black mana. Like they're playing a 3-color deck and they're also playing Bolas' Citadel or like something that is like black intensive. And I'm like, hey, now all of your lands are swamps. You've been missing your swamp land drops, right? Like,
yeah.
Do
you think this is few or do you think it's some? I think it might be some.
I think some. I would call this some. Urza's Saga is the next one that's going to fit in one of our categories.
So much text box here.
It's an enchantment land that taps for a colorless, and then it's. It also creates artifact creatures, which is cool, but it lets you search for your Mana Crypt, Band, or your Soul Ring in this instance, right? At the end of the saga, and put it on the battlefield, which is very good.
Did you already say it makes a construct?
It makes us. I said servo, but I meant construct.
I never noticed the subtype is Urza's Saga.
Whoa, that's really interesting.
It's not just a saga; it's Urza's Saga.
Oh, that's hilarious! I never noticed that.
I don't know why that is.
Is that for all of it? Let me see. For all the printings, it is.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Wild. So is Urza's a subtype? Oh, Urza's is a subtype. Urza's Mine, Urza's
oh, wow. Interesting.
Tower.
Very cool.
Yeah, crazy.
That's cool.
Wow.
So this
goes in most decks, right?
Yeah, it's just so good.
Yeah.
Okay, next one here. This is one that I saw and thought was very cool. Vault of the Archangel. It's a land. They're all lands. I don't know why I keep saying that. Taps for a colorless. And you can pay 2 and white, black, and tap it. And creatures you control gain Death Touch and Lifelink until end of turn. Only can play this in Orzhov decks, but just put this in every Orzhov deck, right?
Yeah, so we're saying this about a lot of cards, just like, yeah, just put it. I mean, it still taps for mana. At some point, you have to draw a line and fix your colors.
Right.
This one's probably above the grade for that.
Put this in maybe this is narrow because this wants to go in like a life gain deck or something. But I just keep thinking about
Death Touch. Death Touch is so good.
Gets through for combat damage. You gain the life from the combat damage you're getting through the deal anyway.
I think it's probably some. I think
it's good. Okay.
Okay, this one I don't know because this card was reprinted. I think it used to be more expensive. It got reprinted in the Modern Horizons 3 Commander deck. It's Vesuva. It's a land. It's actually interesting. I figured it would be a legendary land, but it is not. You may have Vesuva enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land on the battlefield. Is this just most? Because it can snag your opponent's command tower, or it can snag one of your color fixing lands, or it can snag your opponent's Gaia's Cradle. Like, is this just another copy of the best land on the battlefield?
Yeah, I think this is mostly played as a pair with Dark Depths, like Thespian Stages, right?
It's true, because it does enter tapped.
Right. So we've talked about we've tried not to reference other episodes as much and other things we talked about, but entering tapped has been something we've really been against in other episodes, and I think that's a point against Vesuva, even though it does.
I think that's true. So is it narrow because you're only going to play this as a combo piece, or is it still like pretty good if you can just make it enter as a tapped command tower?
I think it's still pretty good if you make it enter as a tapped command tower, but I'm not putting this in very many decks if I'm being.
So is this like fewer some? Or is it just narrow because you just really?
I think some is pretty good. Here's the thing: is like it also enters as it enters as it, so you can have it enter as like a surveil land, or like as a bounce land if you care about that. Like
which is already entering tapped.
Yeah.
So you can get your both Seiju back, so you can channel it.
That's pretty cool. I would call this some.
Okay. I need to experiment with this one.
Some borderline most. I've never played it, so I don't really know.
Sure. War Room. We've been talking a lot about this one. This is a land that taps for colorless, or you can pay 3, tap it, and pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity, and you get to draw a card.
I saw this mostly in the Command Zone when I was early on playing, or like other gameplay podcasts.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it happen and someone just drawing a card from their land, and that feels really good. I think, again, with these, my brain is biased towards like limited, where these effects are actually like pretty darn good. That you can like pay into a land. Which I don't think
this was ever a limited card, was it?
No, not at all. But like I think like the type of effect of having this 3-mana draw card is not bad especially on a land, right?
Yeah.
In this instance, I guess it's technically 4-mana draw card if you tap this, and then also pay life equal to your commander's colors.
So like best case scenario, this is 4 mana, pay 1 life, draw card.
Yeah, but I think like if you look at
it's on a land.
Yeah, but if you look at like Commander Sphere, that's like, I guess worst case scenario, 3 mana, tap for a color, once draw a card, right? And this is like repeatable.
Sure, but isn't Minas Tirith just like way better than this?
Sure, but only in white. And you have to have attacked with creatures. This is like unconditional, I now draw a card.
Yeah, and I think the case that we were talking about when we were talking about this earlier is if you don't have any cards in your hand, then this is great because you weren't playing anything anyways, right? So exactly. It gets you a card.
This is good at a point in the game where you need cards. The fact that this is a staple to a land is cool because you don't have to spend a card to do it.
I don't think you're going to play this in 3+ color decks, though. Because of fixing, and B, because then you're losing 3 to 5 life to
Yeah,
draw a card, and that's not worth it.
Yeah. Monocolor decks and 2-color decks, especially if you're hurting for card draw in those colors, which you shouldn't be very much anymore.
I wouldn't count this towards card draw, though. I would just have it be a late game redundancy if I have 0 cards in hand.
Right.
It's like a Hail Mary at the very end of the game to be like, draw me a card to play.
Yep,
I don't know.
I agree.
There's probably some.
Some.
I don't know.
Some decks maybe want that. Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, is Urborg for forests.
Yeah,
It's a legendary
I don't
land.
remember what
Each
we
land is
put-
a forest in addition to its other types.
Yeah.
You're playing this... there's got to be situations where you're playing this outside of Urborg. The one thing I was thinking of as we were leading up to this was it does turn on like Forest Walk. And Urborg turns on like
funny.
Swamp Walk, right? Because now your opponents have swamps and forests.
Yeah, so this one specifically is better with Gaia's Cradle because it makes Gaia's Cradle tap for green even if you don't have creatures, and then if you have a creature that untaps a forest, then you can untap Gaia's Cradle.
Wow,
So,
cool.
yeah, this one is like combo-y in that sense, but also it's just good at fixing your mana.
Well, and there's stuff that cares about the number of forests you control or whatever.
There's actually
like,
quite a few things that care about the number of forests you control. So I'd say this is probably some.
cool.
I don't think you put it in every green deck.
Last one. We made it, everybody. Zalfarin Void. It's a land, enters the battlefield, you scry 1, and it taps for a color. It says an untapped scry land, but doesn't fix your mana.
This goes in for sure 1 color decks, right?
Yeah, some decks it goes in,
Some decks.
right? Boom. The definitive.
Oh gosh, don't say definitive. We just chose the ones that we thought would be some of the most popular ones, some that represent types of effects, and some that we think are good that you should be aware of. So obviously couldn't have covered all the monocolored or utility lands. If there are ones that you love to play that you think are really good, please leave them in the comments below. We'd really love to see them. And as always, we'll include this deck list in the description of the video so that you can reference it in the future if it is helpful.
Yes, absolutely. I think we nailed it. No, I think this is really tough because we also just we said this at the beginning. We ignored power levels as well, right? So like, looking through the list, the ones that are in the most category are also like the highest power ones.
Sure,
like
except for like
ones.
Bojuka Bog and Mosswort Bridge.
Right, yeah, not in every case, but some of them are, and I maybe wouldn't play them in lower power decks. But like, I think that is probably true of a lot of these utility lands, is that they're they're either very narrow and powerful in the narrow strategy, or just generically very powerful, and as a result, they're also higher power cards probably. And
yeah, when we talked about how we were going to structure these land episodes, we knew that for the dual color and the multicolor lands, it was on a ranking of how effective they are at fixing your mana, and that makes sense. And it makes your deck more consistent. We don't believe that makes your deck necessarily more powerful. It does a little bit, but we shouldn't worry too much about that. We just want to be playing mana bases that can cast spells and make your deck run consistently. But when it comes to utility lands, you're not playing them to make your deck run consistently for the most part. You're playing them because it's going to have a powerful effect on the game, usually at the cost of not fixing your mana. So we talked about separating the utility lands by power level instead, and we did not. We decided to just talk about how often you should probably be playing these lands and when you should be playing these lands, and then you need to consider the power level for yourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think is correct, because there are some that are we talked about like Field of the Dead and Hall of Helios Generosity that are like objectively traps that people will put in decks because they play a good enchantment or they play lands that all decks do, right? But you don't want them in every deck. And I think that was important to nail down, is like Field of Dead is very powerful, but only in a land strategy as much as I want to play it in every zombie deck that I play, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening. Thank you for sticking with us. If you stuck with us till now, this is a very long one. Hopefully our next one will be a little more brief as we build a mana base together. We're going to be, if that's our next episode, the next one in the series will be that. I think that's the plan, though, is the next episode will be building a mana base.
Works for me.
Count on it. We're going to be building a mana base on our next episode. We will decide how best to do that with the knowledge that we've put together from our previous episodes as well. If you have any feedback on this, have any suggestions on episodes that you'd like to see, please reach out to us. join our Discord. We have a Discord now. We have that linked in our channel description, so be sure to go there. It's been really fun. We just wrapped up December, so we're no longer doing that, but it was very fun to have community engagement, and we'll be looking for opportunities to engage with the community more, play games with people. It's in the early stages now, and that may not always be the case that we're just hopping in and playing games with everybody. So please come join now, because it's been really fun to have everyone there.
And we'll be announcing our 4 winners of December later this month as well with our special gameplay episode. So stick around if you want to see that.
Yes, absolutely. Everybody, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember to always play the one.